Chad, I'm so glad you're here. Hi, Hart.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Hey, Cole. So let's see, I want the agenda. Hello, Avery.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. See that, Avery? He pastes the agenda notes into the chat at the beginning of the meeting. And he remains conscious of the fact that people who join late won't see it, so it will show up again later. What an exemplary role model. Adam Sachs. That's not Adam Sachs. Got my hopes
No,
up.
I'm in disguise today.
Okay. How does that happen? Are you visiting Boston, Cambridge?
No, I sign in
I see.
his information when I get on Bio for Climate stuff, and I guess my name is now changed.
We'll give people a few minutes to get here, but I'm pleased to see Eric and Chad. Eric, do you know Naomi Neems? Naomi
No.
Neems.
No, I don't.
Okay, so she's based in Spain, and she has a nice program with young children. I think kindergartners, planting trees and so on. And I want to add her to this emerging educational initiative discussion group. And having said it out loud, Cole and Avery will help me remember.
Okay.
Good morning, Philip.
As people gather, I just want to thank Hart Hagen for all the various postings he's doing on the ERA Facebook page, his own page. He's sort of encapsulating a lot of the ideas around our predicament, working with nature and the fantasy of electrification and so on. So he's doing a great job of kind of creating little bite-sized excerpts, and particularly the series you're doing to pull out from the interview with Tom Murphy, and I think you're doing something with Bill Rees as well. But all of those I think are essential elements to understand the predicament we're in and help us sort through the strategies that we're embarking on to try to address some of it. So thanks,
Thank you.
Hart.
Thank you, Philip.
I think of Hart as the master of pith.
Yeah, I've been enjoying your posts on Facebook.
Thank you.
This is Charlie, by the way. For some reason,
Hello.
I'm getting a message that's like google.com is blocked. So I'll have to work that out this
That's a weird
afternoon.
one. Nice to see you though, Charlie.
Yep.
So they finally found you out, Charlie.
I've been trying to stay clandestine all these months.
You know, by the way, Hart, there are now free services, I'm trying to find one of them, that will summarize YouTube videos. So you get text descriptions of what's discussed along with links. And I'm trying to figure out how we can make use of it. But for example, I mean, obviously your videos might be useful that way, be used that way. Natalie Topa has got probably 100 videos of her various travels around the world where she gives presentations with video. And I'm hoping to somehow run all of those links through a process so that we can find snippets and then put them to onto the big map. But if you just click on how to summarize a YouTube video, if you Google that phrase, you'll see a number of services, and I haven't picked the best one yet, but you know, as with a lot of the early AI stuff, it's spotty, but some of them are sometimes really good. That's all I can report.
That would be very useful because that is that's a substantial kind of delay in my finally putting a YouTube video on, is to feel like I have something to say about it. And so.
Okay, we're a small group. You know, I'm beginning to think that the 3 p.m. meeting has tended to be the best attended. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but if that's true, we might consider that we standardize on that, since the late ones for us are, anyway, you get the point. We should look into that. Okay. Hello, ERA. Nice to see everybody. A small group today. And I am looking for the agenda document, which is going to be appearing, is already in the chat if you have been here for a while, and will soon be in the chat if you are only arriving. I'm gonna start with projects and new members in case other people come in. And we actually have had a number of really interesting new people, several of whom are here and at least one of whom is still expected. Chad, you are one of the many interesting people that Carolyn Petruzzi has brought our way. Would you like to, if you're really there, say hello, introduce yourself? And if you're not there, I suggest you stay on mute with your camera off. Okay. Avery Korea is Cole's partner at the moment, while Cole prepares to be torn away from the arms of the ERA and embedded within Bio for Climate. Avery, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you come to us?
Sure. I'm a student at BCC. I'm currently working on my associates in physics, and I am one of Professor Wood's students, and she introduced me to the organization. And as John said, I'm working as an understudy with Cole, and hopefully I can fill those shoes.
BCC is Bristol Community College, located where in Massachusetts?
Fall River.
Where?
Fall River, Massachusetts.
Fall River, Massachusetts, which is where? How far from Boston?
Ooh, a little bit less than an hour. Yeah,
Yeah, I'd say
about an
right
hour.
about, if you're looking at a map of Massachusetts, you have the arm of Cape Cod that comes off the bottom right. Fall River is just a little ways to the left.
Hmm.
West,
Okay,
for
then.
those of you who know that terminology.
Cool.
Sorry, I'm not used to the global terminology yet. I'm still working with the local stuff, you know.
That's right. BCC and here. Okay. And Eric will be well, Eric, say hello. Tell us a little bit about yourself
Hello.
and your connections to other groups that and movements that we might be interested in.
Yeah, okay, so my field is youth leadership. That means young people. Well, I'm a trained teacher, so I understand how teachers think. In the year 2000, got to know lots of sustainability solutions at the World Exposition. Since then, I thought, okay, how can we connect the world's Einstein's people-powered solutions to the young generation at school? And then I led a positive news magazine with UNESCO status, 13 languages, which was reporting on solutions. And then I got to meet lots of world experts and famous heroes. And then the teenage heroines appeared big time since 2012. And that is like the most spectacular phenomenon. At the same time, it tells you don't need 40 years of experience to implement a high impact project. Plus, they have superpowers. People really love it. Parents, teachers, counselors, they know they have no hidden agenda. The kids have this win-win benefit for putting in their time of sense of adventure, community, real friends, badges. So that's a very powerful segment of the population. And many just noticed with some big projects like the march, like those against gun violence, or now the Fridays for Future protesters. But that is just a very small part. And especially in North America, you know that kids usually stand up to heal the people and the land and their communities. It's been part of civic education in North America for 50 years. And I want this to happen everywhere with focus on projects, not protests, and then waiting for the government to pay someone to fix things. You can still do that, but there's so much time every afternoon in school and clubs and on the weekend to make change making your sport. So, and I just published a 540-page manual with lots of photos and stuff. And some of these relations from my past 15 years is now an emerging work net in Africa, where we have diverse change makers leading high impact initiatives from rural regions to refugee camps. And some of them are youth-led, and others want to empower young people, like to nurture lots of clubs and crews, like I just featured what's already a big phenomenon in North America. So actually all of those in Africa, they need this like rapid reforestation, food forests, water, and they're really eloquent speakers. So they're really cool for schools in America or Europe, for example, to bring global issues to life, to meet them, to not just talk about SDGs, and to like, wow, we can do something in these refugee camps, you know, a topic you hardly ever want to touch because it's so hopeless. Or you have a Quidditch league, you know, this Harry Potter sport in the bush in Africa, founded by John, who have opened a free school. And that means for a school and for the 3 caring teachers at an American school, wherever you are, the green one, the social one, the wild one, these are very exciting outer school partners to bring global issues to life and to really inspire your students. So with your fundraisers, you can really change lives and land. especially there in low income regions, which gives you this feeling of agency and motivation. Okay, what else can we do? You know, and then we have a set of 50 teenage heroes, and each comes with a 4-step action guide, easy to advance. That's 200 different missions, food, water, development, and so on. And now we also have these adult groups like you. So for example, the Miyawaki forest, I've been sitting here for 3 days, and I just, as the meeting started, I finished a PDF with how that can be applied as an entire learnscape in the school ground and beyond school, to do much more and add many more learning dimensions than just once planting a forest, which is so genius that it grows by itself. So you just plant it and then it grows. But a teacher might say, hey, I need more activities if we have this on our ground for coming years. So this learnscape, if I get to upload the PDF while we're here, offers many more learning dimensions to evolve over years and to involve many more than just the passionate planters and members of the community. And it's also outside schools, public spaces, parks, or holiday regions with hotels, which might all be user groups to promote this curriculum too. So that is
Very exciting.
some impression.
So we'll be talking about the Miyawaki projects in a few minutes. And if you can upload your document or mail it to Cole or me, it would be great actually to go through it in real time. But before we go to that, I wanted to say, so you are publishing a print magazine and also putting it online. And these pamphlets are obviously physical productions as well.
Yeah, so I had an online magazine through the 10 years of the UN Decade of Education for Sustainable Development, 2005 to 2014. And we had lots of online volunteers, you know, because I thought, okay, there's no money to do this, especially not in Europe. There's never anything for innovation, really. It's just like you put a funding course in, you have to say what you're going to do for the next year on Wednesday morning, Wednesday afternoon, and then you're never able to like respond to opportunities. And you only get funded once. You never get repeat funding, so that's why the projects always die and become a cemetery online. So that's
I've
why
noticed that there are all of these admirable European projects that seem very polished, and yet you see them when they're published and then nothing happens.
Exactly. So, and that is why I decided to do it free. You know, 2005, that's like way before YouTube and WordPress and Facebook. And so they could get replicated in other regions. So we had lots of online volunteers. I actually drew 11,000 applications. That's 10% of the UN online volunteers in the decade. And got lots of awards. And it was meant that teachers could print the stories cheap on the school computer, you know, and use it. So it would distribute everybody's contribution instead of having to print lots of paper magazines and ship them around the world. But teachers wouldn't do it. So then it happened. The teacher said, yeah, but can I buy this magazine? And I said, we did it for free, you know, on purpose. And they said, no, that's too much effort. And the school printer is always at like low ink, you know, so it's gray, it's not pretty. Can we buy it? And then they said, look, like a biology class book is like $70, you know? So suddenly I found, okay, teachers, they don't care about money is no issue. So then I said, okay, we're going to start with these workshop tools to use in class. Then we have the bigger posters, a double page for exhibits on teenage heroes for long-term presence. Then I have a book. And then I have a whole workshop pack with 1,000 pieces to get from inspiration to action and planning campaigns on your city map and so on. And then I thought, okay, I'm not going to do a new website like everybody's doing web relaunches right now. And then I thought, okay, all the stuff I got, nobody clicks through web menus, you know, especially if I send it to the mayor of Paris or someone. But if I get them somewhere and I smash this 5-pound book on the table saying we could do more than table football in youth centers, okay? So look at the heroes, look at the killer experts around the world. Look at the 50 different projects, look at the methodology, how to create an enabling environment, and so on, that they understand, whoa, there's so much we can do. Okay, we're going to put a staff to spend some time with Eric or a weekend training, and we want the book, and you can take it as a course, it has questions. And so after each chapter, you shall upgrade your superpowers by so and so many points. So that's what I just completed. And the day I finished it, all of a sudden, people like John and rich people from New York, everybody starts inviting me to Zoom meetings. So it's very wonderful serendipity. So the time is right. And so I'm relaunching Youth Leader magazine. So first of all, online, so people see it. But by now, there are really good options to print on demand. So it's very affordable to print today. So that means it's going to be online, but the aim is then to have like 100-page, like Vogue or Elle magazine, nice, big color, big photos. And it can be done by volunteers, or I do it myself, to have print issues, because these are timeless stories, and then I can easily fill 4 or 5 already with all the stories that I have. And this is stuff so people can really get it into their home. They can put it in the family cafe. They can put it in a fair trade cafe in Wall Street. They can use it at school, because we need to. Then people say, oh, why paper? It's unsustainable. Let's put it on the phone. I say, yeah, on the bloody phone. Everybody has seen this stuff, and 5 seconds later, it's gone, and you don't remember, because on these electric screens, it does something with your brain. You don't really integrate. You don't memorize. So, and you only see one, and then comes an ad. So that is why you really need this stuff. It slows you down, you touch it, it goes so much deeper, and you see so many stories, and you see it big. Advertising on the street is big because it has a much different impact. So that is why we really need these print media.
And Eric, do you have, or are you thinking about sponsors and advertisements?
No. People can make gifts, donate, but otherwise it's the end users who are buying it, and sponsors can buy like bulk 100 to distribute to the schools in their district. And I don't mind if they put their letterhead on the gift letter to the school, so, but not inside, because it's too much distraction. It's a different spirit, and also someone else like Alan Sands, he wants me on like a big educational platform, millions of dollars with apps and stuff, and we can get corporates. We have a nice program for big companies also, and everybody in cities to get this into schools. I explained to him, look, the sponsors, we have to give them different benefits on return than for them to smash Amazon on the front page, because that moment puts all the kids into Amazon Disneyland, so we don't want that. We have to go away entirely from that vibration to only in the heart, what we really care about, and doing hero stuff. We can switch to Harry Potter feeling and Lord of the Rings feeling, this inner hero. It's really good actually for the cause. But the sponsor, we can think of other things, like, for example, they become part of the community. And if you sponsor this for 20 schools, then we ask you, what else can you offer the student leaders, like an open day tour at the factory or something, so it creates a pipeline to Volkswagen or Mercedes or whatever else they have to offer, and to overcome these trenches, between conscious students and business and stuff. So much about
I have one last question, short answer, please. What fraction of your projects do you think are relevant to eco-restoration?
For example, for the Mibayaki thing, like we discussed, 80% of human behavior is shaped by role models. So I can give you teenage heroes who are teenagers as an introduction to an educational package for teachers, to inspire students. This is what kids can do. So they don't need to wait until they have your guys' age and the beard, so they can start right away. And then kind of a bit package it, you will see what I'm sending.
Okay, we'll talk about that soon. That's great.
and
you,
tell
Eric.
your stories in the magazine, your unfolding adventures, and get some of your eco-restoration. So you get a column, you know, all the time, you know. And then some of your people where you have projects in the Amazon and stuff, not everybody, but the ones that are available can become video speakers to have project partnerships with schools. Because, for example, there's one school in Germany in a small town, they raise $40,000 on a single weekend. And, you know, that is value in the Amazon. And currently everybody's looking, where do we get money for the indigenous, you know? So these partnerships, I would like to connect the networks.
All right, a lot to talk about. Thank you, Eric. On the theme of education and educational documents, first of all, I think you are aware that our partner organization, Bio for Climate, has been doing educational programs related to eco-restoration for quite some time. And they have a large, somewhat hidden backlog of posts and articles and so on and so forth. Maya and Philip and Paula are all with Bio for Climate. And at some point you should compare notes with them and see how best to take the wonderful content they have and make use of it, help it spread around. On the continuing theme of education and documents, I will now ask Peter Bunyard to introduce himself. Peter comes to us by way of Rob DeLate, who's not here today because he's actually convening a group of 7 Amazonian leaders in Brazil right now as a step towards his project. For that matter, Sue Butler, who often forgets about these meetings, I don't know whether we've made a point of sending her a reminder call, is helping to raise some money for that initiative, as discussed at the last or prior meeting, if I remember correctly. But Peter is the author of a book on climate science, and it turns out to be something of an experimentalist as well. And why don't you say hello? And I think sometime soon he's actually going to give us a presentation. He's been, you can tell your story. This group is quite familiar with Anastasia and her work. And welcome, Peter. It's a pleasure to have you here. And you're on mute. You're still on mute. Peter, you are on mute.
Yeah, okay, good. I'm okay now. You can hear me, everybody?
Yes, sir.
Good, that's wonderful. Well, I encountered Rob DeLate a couple of months back, and we started communicating and Zooming and talking. And during the course of the conversation, I brought up at some point that some 12, 13 years ago, I had written a book while I was in Colombia, and it got published by a group called Educar, and I had hoped for an English version, but it didn't happen. So it just appeared in the Spanish version. But I did have a copy of it in English, which indeed I think Rob has now distributed fairly widely as far as I can gather. But that book really was my way of trying to understand what makes for climate. And in the past, I'd had the good fortune to arrange meetings with James Lovelock of the Gaia hypothesis and his co-worker, that admirable woman, Lynn Margulis, and so on. And I was at that time editing and writing for The Ecologist magazine. And so my climate book really was trying to explain that climate is an emergent property of the activities of living organisms over the history of the Earth, since life first apparently appeared, probably some 3,800 million years ago, and in the form of bacteria, which are now part of our bodies, you know, whether mitochondria or indeed the chloroplasts of all plants. And so this book had a you know, I tried with a particular message that ecosystems, as they are and as they have evolved and developed, were a critical part of climate, and that that life had managed to make the Earth, in the Panglossian sense, the best of all possible worlds. And we human beings had inherited the best of all possible worlds made by life as it had been over the eons of time. And well, the book was moderately successful. I gave many talks in Colombia to school children, to indigenous people, and indeed at various universities. And how well the message got across, I really do not know. But I think in Colombia there is certainly amongst many people an awareness of the importance of biodiversity and their, I mean, of course, Colombia has one of the most rich variety of ecosystems that we find on this planet. Everything from the snow-capped Andes to desert in the Guajira to the wettest rainforests in the world in Chocó, Pacific coast, the Amazon, of course. And anyhow, in 2008, I was asked to write a chapter on the Amazon and climate for a book which was called Surviving the 21st Century. And can you hear me? You can. Yeah, okay, it suddenly changed on the screen. And when I wrote my chapter, and it was sent to Antonio Nobre before publication, and he then alerted me to the work, that fantastic paper, 2007 paper of Anastasia and Viktor Gorshkov. And I read that, and it fitted in totally with what I felt was a wonderful example of Gaia, a wonderful example of the way that life is regulating the hydrological cycle. And at that time, I met various climatologists from the United Kingdom Meteorological Office, and they poo-pooed the idea of the biotic pump. They were very dismissive, and that set me to thinking about how one could prove the essential element of the theory, which was that condensation would give rise to surface winds coming from the ocean and deep into the intercontinent. And so I conceived of an experiment, which I then had built at my home in Cornwall in England. And I was told by everyone that it would show absolute, in good old Cornish words, bugger all. It would show absolutely nothing. But they were wrong. And that includes Anastasia and Victor, because they didn't think I could show anything. And anyhow, I mean, in brief, the structure was like a 5 meter high, 5 meter long square donut. My laboratory was in the middle of the donut, so to speak. And in one of the uprights, I had installed some cooling coils attached to a refrigerator outside, of course, outside of the actual experimental space. And when I switched on the refrigeration, which was cooling about, I calculated about 1/400th of the total air in the columns every second, not more. To my astonishment, with the anemometer, I got within 30 seconds of switching on the refrigeration, I got airflow going around the entire structure. From zero airflow when refrigeration was not on. Switched off and the airflow died away, and switched on again after some minutes, and of course it all came back again. And I was able through physics, classical physics, to determine the rate of condensation in the terms of the change in the absolute humidity of the region around where the coils were. In other words, I was doing calculations for different parts of the structure, but the really relevant ones were the ones very close to where the cooling coils were. And the rate of condensation went hand in hand with the airflow velocity. So I got the paper published in an engineering journal in Colombia, published in English. But unfortunately, I don't know why, I don't think Anastasia or Victor were convinced. And yet I'm absolutely certain that the experiments are physical proof that the underlying theory of the biotic pump is 100% correct. And I did a calculation from extrapolating enormously from the experimental data to the entire Amazon basin of what would be the impact of condensation, given that the precipitation is about 2,500 millimeters on average per year. And I discovered that the energies released, or rather the energies involved in what I would call the implosion, as water vapor condenses to liquid water or ice, some more than 1,000-fold sudden reduction in temperature, an implosion in fact, that the implosion force over the entire Amazon basin amounts per second to many hundreds of atomic bombs worth. And if you work out the energy per square meter and then translate that energy into actual velocity, you realize that the implosion energy over the Amazon basin is sufficient to account for the trade winds. And that is 100%, I think, evidence that the biotic pump theory really is what we need to take on board when we are studying the role of forests. So that in a nutshell is that. And just to conclude that Rob, having glanced through the book that I published in 2010, I think the second edition was 2011, wants to revive the book, but with as a campaigning document, explaining what climate is, explaining the Gaian aspects to what climate is, and at the same time using it as a platform, as one of several platforms, but as a platform to bring about regeneration of urgent regeneration of ecosystems. So I think that
That's great.
is that in a nutshell what you want to hear. Yes.
It is indeed, in a nutshell, want to hear. I would love to read or see a description of that experiment and those calculations. I'm not going to be able to track the calculations, but it seems to me a physical model that demonstrates this. And the basic principles are, I think, quite accessible. Might be a really interesting laboratory experiment and project for classrooms as well. It doesn't sound that complicated. I could, by the way, instead of an anemometer, I'm imagining a balloon on the outside so that you could see that if you cool the air in the apparatus, the balloon on the outside shrinks because it's the volume is being sucked in. Anyway, it's really interesting, and I would love to get an accessible presentation from you,
Yes.
which we can share online, and by the way, which we can use to get a reaction of some sort from Anastasia and Dr. Nefiadov,
Oh yes.
whose opinion will be obviously of great interest, pro or con. So that's terrific. By the way, Rob made available your book as a PDF to
Yes.
this group. I've gone through it. I think it is amazingly prescient and readable, which is not the case for most climate books. And it's from our point of view, it's the climate book we have been looking for. I do have a link to the PDF, and if Peter would like it to be shared with this group, we can put it in. But I also just discovered by accident that if you take that PDF and you put it into Google, you get an editable, commentable version of the book. Apparently Google has gotten smart about PDFs. So Peter, I don't know what your policy and strategy is for sharing this, but I think there are many people on this group who might be interested in reviewing the book and possibly adding comments towards your next revision.
I would love that. I'm totally open to it, and I'm happy for interference with it in the sense of my learning, and indeed, if we are able to bring about a new version of the book with quite clearly with a different publisher, we don't have to. It does not have to be with Educar. I am very, very happy for all the help that I can get, and indeed help with the writing as well. If people have particular stories which can be told in terms of restoration, ecology, I'm delighted. I mean, I think to have positive stories which can act to stimulate action amongst others, absolutely brilliant.
Well, I'm going to.
Yes, sorry. I just want to say that with regard to the scientific paper, I did send a copy, I think, to Cole yesterday evening. I don't know whether you got it. And so if you want to make that available, Cole, to John and various others who would like it, I would be very grateful, since you've got all the email addresses and so on.
Absolutely.
So actually, both the PDF to the book and the link to the paper are in today's agenda, I believe. John, correct me if I'm wrong about those links.
I have no reason to correct you. I will add to that the link to the editable document. Peter, I just want to make sure that you're okay. You put something online, especially because we publish these videos, it's possible it will leak out into the general public and enlighten everyone out of your control. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I don't know. Well, if it happens, it happens.
Okay.
Let's give it a go.
All right then. So here's the link to the document that I accidentally created. I will make it open for comments, and the discussion will continue, but we should there are a lot of people in this group who would probably appreciate having access to the book, We'll have comments on the book, and I suspect you'll get a really interesting working group to help you think about how to position and develop it. It's really great to have you here. Any questions or comments for Peter? For that matter, any other questions or comments for Eric? Okay. We have
One
a,
question, one question I have is, I noticed these various, you flagged up various things which are online. How do I tap into those?
Cole, do you want to address that?
Yes. So, Peter, I'll follow up with you again after this meeting. A lot of the links that I had sent over to you for the Google group, the Google Drive, and a lot of what's on our website will be, you can find all of that information there. So after this meeting, what I'll do is I'll send you another email. If you want to, we can meet in a separate Zoom, and I can kind of give you the walkthrough and the housewarming tour, if you will, on everything that we have.
Well, I would be very grateful for that. Yes, thank you.
No problem.
Our third interesting new member of the ERA is Chad McCarthy, who was having some audio problems, but might be able to say hello. He is with us, he says.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Nice. I had to move my location. I'm sorry.
So Chad, do you want to just introduce yourself, how you come to us and what you're working on and where?
Absolutely. So I am located in the USA in Pennsylvania, Northeast section. I currently operate a nonprofit organization called Urban Arc Conservation. What we are is a fully sustainable farm model that really focuses on the impact that farms have on the ecosystems that are surrounding farms and how to improve those as well. So our farm uses techniques such as permaculture, aquaponics, rotational grazing, sustainable agriculture. And we also utilize our livestock for conservation efforts because all of the breeds that we have are currently critically endangered based off of the conservation priority list that the Livestock Conservancy puts out every year. So all of our breeds are usually involved with some kind of zoological association for conservation, but we also educate with the processing and harvesting of those as well. So the farm is an educational site, not just a working farm. The goal is to be able to bring in students from around the world, different locations, and educate them and teach them on these sustainable agricultural processes.
That's great. And it's adult students as well as child students, right? You also have a program for veterans like yourself.
Yes, I've actually written a few classes that we've been teaching around the US. We did a class in Philadelphia, Baltimore, and in Compton in California that are virtual. It's a student, I think it was 4th grade through 6th grade. We did just an introduction to aquaponics and sustainability. And that really, one of the principals actually asked me, hey, are you teaching this at an adult level or a child level? And my philosophy is it's the same level because I don't want to water down anything with the children. You know, their brains can definitely comprehend everything an adult brain can. So all of the terminology and processes, the water conservation and all of these aspects were put into a 12-week program. Like I said, that was done virtually and with great success. A few of the classrooms actually went on further to build out a greenhouse or an aquaponics system and have the kids throughout the year monitor that. And then I was also educating the teachers there. So there would be an on-site representative that knew these aquaponics systems and stuff like that.
Very, very cool. I saw Eric do a fist pump. It's clear, Eric, you're going to get lots of good content for your publications from our community.
But plus, I mean, this is another teaching tool, you know, to put in our collection. So what we always need is that teachers can see other teachers have already done it. You know, it's not just a fantasy. So it's feasible in our school context, facing the common challenges that teachers have, different from normal citizens or NGOs, and that the kids then take ownership and follow up with it. So if you have a few photos and just a few lines, photo essay is basically enough, that would be really great. And then it becomes another project that we promote in our collection with Youth Leader with a focus on aquaponics and stuff. That'd be great.
Absolutely. I can send that over an email. I appreciate you guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, at some point, if there's any need for it, we might want to have a discussion about intellectual property rights. I sort of alluded to the issue with Peter, but Eric and Chad and others are producing really interesting and valuable content. And as the authors of that content, they get to decide on the policy. There are lots of ways to go. I will say that Enable and other groups have used Creative Commons and other open source licenses in order to encourage people to adapt and deploy intellectual property that they have created. In many cases saying, just acknowledge us as authors, even though they recognize that that acknowledgement is unlikely to be enforced. In these days of ChatGPT, it's even less likely to be enforced. ChatGPT is going to claim to have all of this wisdom innately. But, you know, if you're fundamentally interested in getting the word out, these are all positive developments. At some point, the ERA might want to articulate an intellectual property policy. But, you know, by default, member-created content is under the control of the members. And I have actually a fair amount of experience in this in the past, so I'm quite happy to advise or recommend as needed. Okay. Continuing on the theme of education, I want to, I'm just looking around, you know, everyone in this group, all right, I'm going to give just a very brief introduction to an initiative I've been cooking for quite some time called the Miyawaki Multiversity. I'll share my screen. Almost everyone in this group has already seen this story, but I'll put it here because I want ERA to consider how it fits in the array of projects we're undergoing. I think it's a particularly fundable project, but as Ananda Fitzsimmons of the steering committee pointed out, unlike many of our projects, it's likely to have more localized benefits than the ones that focus on online information and so on. And so there may be some additional issues. So I'm sharing my screen. I'm looking for the Miyawaki proposition. And a link to this is in the agenda. But here's the basic story. First of all, as probably everyone here knows, about 40 years ago, and by the way, Maya Dutta from Bio for Climate is our Biodiversity for Livable Climates champion for Miyawaki forests and has developed several and is continuing that program in the area. But I've been so impressed and inspired by what they have been doing that I am hereby trying to frame this as something that could happen with our support all over the world and become a way not just of making forests, but also making forest makers and educating everyone around it. So the Akira Miyawaki's insight and technique was to recognize that healthy, mature ecosystems are comprised of many species of plants and animals who co-evolved and co-adapted in a particular environment and actually evolved the ability to benefit from each other's presence. So a healthy ecosystem is a synergistic collection of native species. He realized that if instead of planting a tree or a bunch of trees in a monoculture forest, you plant a suite of co-adapted species in an environment to which they have evolved over millions of years, all of those synergies accelerate the growth. I think the number is tenfold. The biodiversity supported 100-fold, and the speed at which you go from seedlings to a mature ecosystem is greatly accelerated. So that's the Miyawaki method, and these are called Miyawaki forests or mini forests or pocket forests. And I'm playing around right now with the notion of accelerated rewilding as a somewhat generalized version of this proposition, because there are other techniques for accelerated rewilding as well that all are based on this fundamental insight about synergistic co-adapted species, and a technique for preparing the soil as if you're going to build a complete ecosystem and kickstarting the whole process. None of that is original to me. In fact, none of this is original to me, but I'm impressed by the fact that every university, every campus, almost every university, almost every campus, almost every school is loaded these days with students who really want to do something important and meaningful about the environment. Typically, they've got lots of monoculture grass, only some of which is used for recreational purposes. And many of them have donors who would like to have something named after themselves. As Naomi Nemes is doing with preschoolers in Spain, and as some of Eric's heroes have already done in various schools, I think there should be an open source curriculum and a series of consulting or logistical support services that would allow every school, every campus, every community college, maybe every vocational school to take some classes or engage in an extended after-school program, as Eric has urged, and to assess the landscape available to them, to pick a site, to plant and nurture a Miyawaki forest, and to study it as it develops as part of their experiential learning program, and for that matter, to mentor the next junior class as they work on their own second or third or fourth installment of the Miyawaki forest. And if they're of a certain age, when they graduate, to then be prepared to be the next cohort of ecosystem makers and offer these services in their neighborhoods, their communities, neighboring cities, and so on. The point is, I think it's, if you understand the principles of the Miyawaki forest and you can get young people involved in it, they will learn not from the teachers, but from the land and from the experience, and they will become a growing, an exponentially growable cohort of restorers and restorationists and advocates at the same time as they're actually changing the facts on the ground and producing lasting artifacts in the form of these forests that will themselves teach people who aren't directly involved about the benefits of rewilding, and of course, improve local and global environments. So that's the concept as I have sketched it in this 2-pager, a link to which is available to you, and comments from which are hereby solicited. for what I was thinking of as the Miyawaki multiversity, but based on recent conversations with Eric, I think it's got potential. And there have been schools and universities, but not many, that have already begun doing this kind of thing. I suspect that a next step would be to catalog the various schools and universities that have begun doing this kind of thing, and to try to bring some of the key players from around the world together to develop an open source curriculum and some workshops, and then figure out how to make it a no-brainer for every school to get on board and begin doing this kind of thing. So to me, it's an exemplary program of the sort that the ERA is trying to do. It teaches, it changes facts on the ground, and it gets more and more people involved. But it's been sort of a pet obsession of mine for some months, and so I wanted to put it out here. Now, I described this to Eric just a few days ago, and he's really been running with it, and he may have managed to upload a PDF. So I will pause to see if there are questions before I let Eric just pick it up and show us what he's thinking, and then we can have a more general discussion. Any questions about what I've presented so far?
Not a
Okay.
question, but just a note that Eric did send me the PDF, and I do have that in the notes document, and I'll share it to the chat.
All right. And Eric, you can probably share your screen. Philip?
I just wanted to add that a key insight of Akira Miyawaki was that the natural succession for forests typically takes 120 to 200 years, and that by preparing the soil and planting the species mix of a climax forest, you can actually shorten the growth of a mature forest to 50 or 60 years. So that's one of the key components that I think we're trying to do, is to feature that accelerated process. And then I just did a Google search, which I will, if I can find the link again, I'll put in there are already quite a few Miyawaki forests that have been planted on campuses around the world, colleges, universities, even primary school. So I think we might want to poke around in some of those and see what kind of curriculums may have been developed.
I think that's right. And by the way, Philip is pushing a Miyawaki project in Maryland, and is trying to develop a food forest technique as well. And is there anything else about that Philip wishes to say?
Yeah, we're forming a partnership with something called the Reed Center. I'll put the link in there. They are already several years into guiding the succession on about 160 acres, 40 of which is already forest, but the rest of it was formerly planted in corn. And they're turning it into a permaculture food forest as a model for the region, doing permaculture design courses on that campus in early stages. But we've been talking to them about running some experiments, looking at Miyawaki forests, looking at traditional 10, 15-foot spacing plantings of more mature trees, natural succession, and experimenting with the idea of a hybrid Miyawaki food forest. There are some physical constraints around, what fruit and nut trees need that may run counter to what happens when you plant a Miyawaki forest, but we're going to be seeing what we might be able to do. Most of the Miyawaki forests, as far as I know, around the world have largely been just native species mix. And when you plant a food forest, you preferentially may make exceptions to that rule in order to have something that's edible. But anyway. Great.
Maya, I'm going to put you on the spot after Eric's presentation and just get your reaction to all of this, if you're here, since you're, to my knowledge, the only person in the room who has actually done this. But Eric, do you want to show your PDF or just summarize what you're thinking? You're on mute.
I'm not sure if I can share my screen.
Okay, I can share your screen.
Mine?
Well, no, I
Okay.
can't share your screen, but I can share your document.
Yeah,
Eric,
go
you
ahead.
should be all set to share. You have permissions enabled.
Where is it?
At the bottom of
On
the
the
Zoom
floor?
screen.
Here we go now. All right. Okay, so I try my screen. Okay, so I guess you see a little forest now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this would be a forest. You know, I did this scribble in the past 3 days. So like I said, how can we motivate teachers and others to plant a forest? So we are talking about planting forest because our priority is, oh, we got to save the climate and so on. But we are part of a few. Obviously, for most part of the population, it is not sufficient a priority in their inner alchemy or their perception and consciousness to plant a forest, to make the effort. So I'm looking at win-win benefits for different major user groups that have things like what John pointed out. They have space, and they have people that can get involved, many hands to create it, and that benefit from the forest being in existence. For example, to study it, then to pass on the knowledge to younger cohorts of students, instead of just looking at it. For example, if a company plants it next to the building, okay, they plant it, cool, we did something good for the planet, which is so little, and then no one looks at it again. You know, people walk past it with their cell phone during their breaks. So this is not sufficient motivation. So can we find more dimensions of meaning and learning and activity that align with the core interest of other user groups? So here, I've detected so far teachers and schools as a major user group, the caring teachers. Then you will have city officials, you know, for like community parks and so on. And that may also be some businesses like family hotels, you know, but it has to be more than just a tree, so, or the tiny forest. So let's see what else we can do around it. So I've so far come up with sufficient elements to add around it, you know. So, and most of these are common sense stuff that's already been done by normal people, you know. First thing that you see here is an edible food garden, you know. So you have a herb spiral, you have one of these upper beds, you know, in a box. Then you have tomatoes, and you have pumpkin, zucchini, herbs, lettuce, seedlings, green beans. Really cool. I like green beans because they grow really fast, you know, and then you eat them fresh, which is a rare experience for most city kids. And potatoes. It's so nice to have your hands in the ground and then have these balls of gold, you know. So you think about the sensual experience. They plant it, and already later in the year, there's more interactions as you start harvesting. It's not just once planting and then looking at it to study it, you know? So this is, for example, what teachers like also for nutrition, you know, for the kids, and to put it in the school canteen. So next thing here is a pollinator garden. Simple thing, exists in so many places. People know we want to do something for butterflies, the bees, and others. The next element, you may have a creek nearby, or you create a pond. A pond is not so difficult. It's super fascinating for students. Then you see the butterflies, the birds coming, and even hornets, you know. So then I like the idea of adding a few pine trees, you know, because it didn't show pine trees in the Miyawaki. I'm not sure whether they're part of it, you know, just so to show that in the wintertime, when all the leaves are down, these ones, they are still green. What's happening, you know, just so we make sure that we also have that experience for the kids. And then here is the difference. Now you can actually use it and indulge in it. So it becomes an edible forest. It can still stay Miyawaki inside. And it says like it's 20 to 30 yards is like a minimum size for Miyawaki forest. If you just at the four corners, you know, you have an apple tree, a plum tree, a pear tree, there's hundreds of apples in it. You know, that's enough for this experience of abundance at a primary school. And then you should have these hedges to pick berries. Berries are so cool, and if you don't have a garden, you can never pick berries because they're no more in the forest and in the landscape. You know, we should reinstall them because this is expensive, yummy stuff from the store. So we definitely need berry hedges. It's going to be so popular, plus it's in the eye height of kids. So what's the next thing? Here, now we make it usable. So on the left-hand side, you see there's a seed library. Okay, now there's a seed library where you have lots of different seeds, what they look like. You can bring your seeds and you can take home to your home family garden. You plant stuff, and after it's grown, you know, you harvest the seeds and bring them back to the library. So, and on the very top now, what appeared is a dyeing garden. So you have colors from which you can, plants from which you can source color for arts, paintings, dyes, you know, cosmetics, you know. This is so cool. I'm with 7 Gardens, which has practitioners in 30 countries now, most decorated UNESCO program. And that is so fascinating for people, you know, especially the red cabbage. You shred it, then through a little piece of cloth, you put a little bit of water so it becomes like mushy, you know, and then you squeeze it. So then you only have these drops of purple water on your plate. And that is already, really archetypal experience, like it's Stone Age, you know, first time we put paintings on the walls. And then you add a little bit of soda powder and boom, it turns pink or green. And then you add a little bit of lemon and boom, it changes color again. Because this one especially responds to higher and less, what's it called, pH or something, you know, alkalic, I'm not a scientist, you know, anyways, you know, so everybody loves it. I swear, it's total fascination. It's really strong. No matter if kids grow up with this, you know, this, whoa. And like for 1.5 hours, if you put some more pots with different plants, we had kids age 10 at a big birthday in the summer outside in a huge garden. And the boys, 8 to 12, stayed there for 2 hours experimenting with this stuff. And then you said cosmetics, can we do lipstick for mom? So we took the rose petals and just with some coconut oil, you know, and then mom had to come. And then there was something that didn't work out. So I took a phone, I had a video meeting with one of our coaches, Zainab, who's the pro on cosmetics, you know. So this is really, this very rich. It's very popular now in Europe. And so that is very useful. So you don't just look at things, you don't just eat them, but whoa, we can do this. And this is a very ancient cultural asset in all cultures that got lost, but there was a huge science around it. Even in the guilds, who had the right to wear what color? You know, it was like, you know, it's huge. So there's so much to discover. And you have a strong group, these history museums and local museums, you know, it's stuff of these old dusty people that are totally passionate about it and no one wants to listen, you know. So you get, and this culture is also where you can get funds, you know, city, ancient cultural heritage, you know, this is very interesting. And the natives of Mexico said, yeah, what are you white men going to teach me about like nature, you know? And then Peter, the founder, the artist, explained to her, and she started crying because she noticed, damn, this is what my grandma taught me when I was a kid, and we totally forgot. We're just using toxic chemical colors in the stuff we do. So actually talking to this white guy from Germany made indigenous people in Mexico, but also in Brazil, to start sourcing their own colors again. And this is really important because it's super toxic, the whole color thing, and the kids in China and Pakistan, and then they get cancer at age 30. So this is very powerful. And what's very important is it's citizen science 2.0. That means you can research, and just by trying, okay, now it's like aquarelle, watery color. How can I make it more like paint? So what is the paint? Yeah, it has a stronger body. What could it be, you know? And then, yeah, maybe if we add sand, no, that's too much. So then you figure out it's a very fine flour from like tapioca or rice, you know? And then, yeah, could it be more creamy? Yeah, like oil color. What oil? Lint. So it's a very interesting science thing. I would shorten myself, you know, but just to say we can very interesting dimensions of meaning. But if the interesting thing is, if you take the forest away, everything is really flat. So to add the forest, even around this other stuff, is really important. You know, this is the energy pillar in the center. But to make it more interactive for more is really cool to add these things. So then here, an educational path, you know, like Xerxes did in his parents' farm and the adjoining forest. You have the kids research, study, and you make it very nice. Now you got crafts, you know, you're hammering it with woodwork and make it nice, not an ugly plastic panel, you know, you add beauty. So this is science research. Teachers will love the kids to do it also in the public park. So, and then of course, here you can add an app, okay, with multimedia content, with all your eco-restoration things. So, and that's for the kids and will be spoken by children and 14-year-olds, not by adults. And it's so cool. This makes it interesting for families and kids to listen to kids' voices. In Hamburg, the subway, the stations are announced by like 8-year-old kids in the automatic, you know, the station when it's announced, when you get to the new station. Yeah, Pennsylvania Avenue, you know, by real school kids. It's such a cool sense of being part of the city, you know, it's never done. So this is going to add a lot to the flair if this educational app is spoken by kids, plus it's media education again, you know. So here comes then tech. On the right side, you see, now you have bridges over the creek. Build a bridge. You know, and shall it be flat or will it be rounded, that it's more romantic for lovers? You know, this is the stuff we discuss for people in Africa, because in the countryside, they want to teach the girls engineering. Yeah, you need a real project. You can build a house, you can put solar panels, but now build a bridge on the restored land over the gullies. It's so cool, you know, let the young people do it with an adult mentor so it doesn't break, you know. So, and here at the very bottom, you have more Huckleberry Finn thing, you know, an old, like these wooden logs, you know, improvised one. And then you have a lantern, and the lantern is solar powered. So what you can then add, if you have a creek, is a micro turbine, you know, so you can add all these technology, STEM, maker, engineering dimensions if you want to, and it definitely contributes to this space and environment. So, and then here, if you look at the forest again, you see these posts show up. So this is what I like. Now we add a layer of culture, okay? So culture is already with the dying garden, but now it's more culture. They have in Canada, they have these international school peace gardens, because peace is really important, but it's invisible in public space. So it's really popular with mayors, counselors, and teachers that the students research peace symbols from their culture, and then again in a beautiful way in crafts class, you know, they work on them in wood, and then they get put up sort of like a totem pole, you know, but from different cultures, usually around forest grove. Like they had these peace groves in Scandinavia. So you just need to put these like at the end, at the side of the forest, you know, and then you have this other dimension of thinking about peace, you know. The brain likes to explore, you know, what is culture. It adds more depth and dreaming, you know. And then on the left side here, how about a sensory garden? You know, you walk barefoot, you know, on different gravel and stones and sticks, and then there's sounds, you know. Primary schools and kindergartens love this stuff, you know. They build sensory gardens. Add one here, because now you attract families, because the adults will want to show kids stuff, but they get bored. So here's something really multisensory for the kids, plus they can co-create it every year if this is a park or a school. And then more culture, a mound, you know. So if you can build a mound, because it's so cool if the land is terraced, and on the mound you can sit and oversee the whole thing, because we need a place to sit, enjoy, and ponder. It's nowhere else on this ground, but it's really good to have at the corner one of these mounds with terraces, and it can be an amphitheater, so people can meet there, music, poetry, you know, so the place becomes a cultural community place. and not just to plant a tree for the climate, but it like really enriches community life. So, and then next one here on the top right, a micro exhibit on teenage heroes and people power and ecosystem restoration projects, of course, with an app, you know, and then you add a map, which is our Learn Planet map, or your globe, John, you know, where you can zoom into other restoration projects, visit, learn, and also have video meetings and donate, crowdfund to some of our heroes, or even meet them live, you know, or yourself, you know. The school can book you on Environmental Day. So it's an occasion for people to come. And then you can have audio installations. For example, in France, or sometimes you have a city forest and suddenly you hear like Amazonian birds in the Berlin Park because they put some audio installation in there from the Humboldt University, you know? So we can do this stuff here. You can have sounds from the Amazon or these screaming birds from Australia. Then you have the sing-song birds from Central Europe, you know? So again, it's research, it's media production, it's tech, you know, the teachers want those dimensions. And music, you know, change generation music, you know, from Aurora and stuff. So people start dreaming and really nice, you know, so all the senses. So, and it's connected to the context on the river or other places. So there's lots of stuff and high value educational stuff for teachers to do with all generations. And then there's a brochure on the top right, you know, you can get a brochure like with your family or school class, then you walk through it self-guided, you find stuff, you colorize, you tick stuff out, you submit online and you get a badge, you know, for basic understanding of multiversity stuff, you know. And so what you see, we don't just have the topic of doing one forest, and all these are people-powered common things. We have climate, nature, soil, biodiversity, food, tech, culture, arts, media, storytelling, positive news, because as things grow, as the next element is set up, as there's a community gathering for poetry, as there's Environmental Day with a video meeting with one of the project partners in Africa, each occasion is a reason to put something on the newsletter of the district, of the school, of organizations, you know, because otherwise people don't learn about Miyawaki forests. So in this way, people learn all the time and you grow a movement around it, you know, and so you get many supporters, it evolves over years. So that's just a little sketch that I got inspired to do. It will definitely include in materials. And yeah, if you like it, you can use it, you know.
It's fantastic, Eric. It's really beautiful and brilliant. It seems to me you need to prototype this, and we need to have the kids with cell phones videotaping you interacting with the kids and making it happen. And that in itself, I think, would be a really great way for people to say, you know, this is not rocket science. Every school could and should do this. And there's hardly a topic in the entire school that couldn't be grounded in this kind of thing. Get the kids out of the classroom and motivate them hugely. Cole, your hand is up.
Yeah, I just had a question, Eric. I don't know if you already had thought of this, but I would suggest that we have some kind of food recycling system included in this model as well, especially around the garden, and something along the lines of like a composting system where students can learn about that as well. Sorry, not a question, it was a suggestion. But other than that, fantastic. I love this.
Yeah, it's part of a food garden, right? And if the garden terrain, first also parents can bring, and the kids can bring stuff, food waste from their home, of course. And then once this garden space here is limited and you got too much compost, well, then you take it home to your garden or you gift it to some park, you know. So, and I also noticed that this installation, for example, the Dying Garden, is super popular in Germany with kindergartens. You know, the kids don't go out with the bobby car, you know, but they go to the little shed and they start making colors. And with mentally handicapped people, I don't know what's the politically correct term now, you know, so differently abled who live together with like 20, 30 people in some center. And they found that the Dying Garden is so cool for them because they treat it. because they have difficulty owning something or doing something real. But this they treat, they build it, and then they create products from it. And they can invite the community for a relevant fest because the differently able, they have difficulty relating with the normal population. And it could also be in centers for challenged youth. You know, often they have co-living for 30 youth from difficult families that live in these orphanage or whatever homes, you know, to give them this, to get in the earth, connect with the senses, to heal and to build and to nurture something. So there's a lot of interesting user groups.
I want to give Christopher, Philip, and Maya a chance to go. And Christopher, that's the order in which your hand went up, so you're first.
This is just a question. You put the pine trees off on the side as separate from the Miyawaki forest. I understand that. But there are a lot of climates in the world. The northeastern US, the northwestern US, which are pine conifer forests. Is there any reason that you couldn't create a Miyawaki forest based on a conifer system? I doubt it's been done. And maybe
I pass on to John.
Well, I've got to pass on to Philip and Maya.
But it just seems that maybe there's a way that kind of an ecosystem could be created in a Miyawaki form.
Sure.
And maybe that's a benefit.
Eric, absolutely fantastic presentation. My suggestion is that you add the cooling role that forests play. In particular, I think that's a message that we're trying to lead with more and more, as what we're facing is global warming. And there's a lot of explosion of interest, particularly throughout US cities, in planting trees to address the heat island effects. And that could easily be added to what you've done here. Thanks.
There's a whole dimension of assessment, measurement that could be added on top of this. Temperature, humidity, the species attracted to the environment, the birds and the insects, all things that can be mapped over time to look at the impact of this locally and then potentially globally as well. Maya Dutta, say hello.
Hello.
There she is.
Hello.
With, by the way,
Sorry,
her
here I
first
am.
Miyawaki forest in the background.
Yes, indeed. Sorry, I've been sort of in a little bit of chaos this morning, so I haven't had my camera on, but I am really, really excited by this presentation. It's a really beautiful vision, and I think it kind of touches on what a lot of practitioners of the Miyawaki method are doing here and there. And it isn't, I think it's often not quite so comprehensive to build all of this into a single project. And that's kind of where the community partnerships come in. For example, working directly with those schools, with those teachers, sometimes with parents, or community groups, volunteer groups, because, you know, we are balancing both the creation of the Miyawaki forest and, you know, moving from site to site and trying to make these happen wherever possible. But I do think a lot of this vision is kind of built into the method of it's meant to be a community forest. You know, that's how Akira Miyawaki conceived of these projects. And so the more that as we discuss this method, you know, a lot of people get really excited by this, like really high growth rate or high survival rate, but then forget certain aspects, like the fact that it is a community forest and the fact that it is an opportunity to learn about native ecology, what these species are, how they grow over time, and simply the fact that, you know, restoration is never one and done. You don't plant and walk away. It's a really beautiful thing that after, you know, the establishment period of 2-3 years, this is self-sustaining, but that doesn't mean it's a no contact forest. So I really appreciated all of the ways that that was kind of built into your vision. So yeah, my thoughts, just really excited for one. I think I am thinking of various kind of Milwaukee forest makers who come to mind who have worked either kind of in school communities. I'm thinking of Dan Blakerod in the Netherlands who have worked. IVN is his organization, and they've already put together a lot of kind of learning materials and pamphlets and things like that to get teachers started on their journey. Then Gray Coupland in Australia and Perth has been working with schools as well. And recently I was able to meet her and hear some of the ways that she works with them. And kind of as you said, you're not planting every month, but on a very regular basis to go out and do monitoring projects or perhaps art projects, or kind of having that interaction is what keeps kids engaged. So I definitely think that it's important to emphasize all of those possibilities in proposing a Milwaukee forest to people, that it can be an advantage to say, this will be self-sustaining, but it is never intended to be hands-off or isolated. So I think a lot of the different possibilities too of the dying garden and the sensory experiences are really a deep part of how we learn. So I think that's important to include. And I do also, the technical details are, of course, different for what species need to be in each forest. So Christopher's question of yes, there are conifer species that belong in climax forests in different parts of the world. Here we've planted, some junipers and, inkberry and things like that. And sorry, that's not a conifer. That's just doesn't shed its leaves. But essentially to say that all of these kind of species mixes and what's appropriate to the given environment will change. And nonetheless, I think it's really valuable to have that vision of, your central forest, and then also all of these kind of related or complementary areas, particularly having kind of a buffer zone is something that has been coming up recently in discussions with other Milwaukee forest makers of, a forest never really exists kind of just go straight into trees. Part of the way that nature works is in this kind of tapered and layered way. So to have areas of grasses and some of these kind of other plants, pollinator gardens are becoming much more kind of popular in this region for sure. And so, across both the tree species and some of these kind of wildflowers and perennials, we can create that space for biodiversity to thrive. I love the idea. Yes, sound sensors. I think there's lots of different sensing possibilities and monitoring possibilities. The other note I was going to make is I love to think about candy growing on bushes in the form of berries and all of the different food possibilities. One of the constraints that we've been operating with, especially in urban landscapes, is just the kind of degraded and sometimes toxic soil. So that unfortunately does sometimes make it really impossible to directly plant and consume fruit and nuts from these trees. But at the same time, where it's possible, I think it's a really wonderful thing to do. And where it's not possible, just to recognize the kind of remediation aspects of having a natural ecosystem and to be able to monitor that, I think is really important. So those are some of my thoughts. Yeah, it was just a really rich presentation. So I appreciate that. And I certainly think that as John and others kind of build out this vision, I would love to see these kind of multifaceted forests plus essentially be implemented, because in a lot of places, people are looking at oh, I've heard the Milwaukee forest is this great grand new thing, let's do that. But it's not the only kind of ecosystem that's possible or important. And also to just kind of let it be part of a broader ecological landscaping, I think can be really, really powerful. So those are my 5 cents, 10 cents. And I'm sure it will kind of spur more ideas. So appreciate that. John, you're muted.
Somebody muted me because there was a dog barking in the back. You are currently working with the school, are you not? In Natick?
Yes, yeah. So we're going to be planting at a high school this year. And part of the discussion has been, of the student groups, and particularly science teachers are a great resource. They're the folks who are able to kind of incorporate this into their lessons. And there's a really interested science teacher who runs an Earth Club. And so all of that has kind of been in discussion of, these are members who we know are going to be interested. This particular high school does kind of senior capstone projects. So it's a really great opportunity for students to come up with their own research questions and their own projects. And I believe actually one of the science teachers did with the Earth Club kind of an aquaponics laboratory or study as well. So, just integrating these different aspects of restoration methodologies, I think will be really important. And
so I just want to point out that, as you may have noticed, Eric is an experienced educational consultant and online instructor and communicator. And as of now, we have a really nice video presentation that you might want to share with the people at Natick. And I suspect Eric would be quite willing to bend their ear and talk about how they could develop this further. I think that finding ways of actually putting this to the test is an immediate opportunity.
Yeah.
This is a conversation that's going to go on. We've got some meetings involving Eric and Miyawaki and this kind of thing coming up. I will try to keep everyone posted, and anyone who has things to contribute, please. I think it's a really emergent opportunity in many senses of the word emergent. We have 23 minutes and we actually have another topic to go to. So we're going to do that. I just wanted to give an update on the organizational and activities and the work of the steering committee. I have some notes in the agenda, which I am calling up, as could you. All right, so using our new voting process, we have basically ratified the near-term proposition that the ERA should transfer its fiscal sponsorship from Bio for Climate, our founding partners, to an existing 501c3 nonprofit corporation called Rochester Enable Limited, which I created some years ago for the Enable community, and which is eager to step into that role and will be able to handle the fiscal sponsorship and the filings and the bank and budget management and so on. So that is ongoing with the guidance of the steering committee and the assent of the community. There is in the agenda a voting tracker, which shows the 22 people actually weighed in. All of them were positive, and no one gave a 2 or a 1, which would have stopped the conversation until we figured out what the concerns were. So that's how our process works. And it is working. And by the way, this vote, and probably all of our votes going forward, is not an anonymous vote. At some point, we're going to be writing out our procedures, which I'll get to in a moment. And that's a question I'd like you to start thinking about. Should there be a mechanism for people to vote pro or con anonymously? I think it's helpful to see who has said how enthusiastic they are, but people may have concerns. Happy to pursue that conversation. There was also active discussion at last town hall meeting and in the steering committee saying, you know, and we have seen this to be true, there are funding sources that will only give to a 501c3 corporation. They don't want to deal with fiscal sponsors. They want to know that the organization they're dealing with is of a standard shape and size and well enough established. So we are moving towards incorporating as our own independent organization and potentially becoming a nonprofit charitable organization so that we can be masters of our own destiny and recipients of grants of that sort. To that end, the agenda has a couple of documents that I just want to encourage everyone to take a look at their leisure. Some of us, with Ananda's help, have been producing a rudimentary 2023 budget. And Evan Blackman, who is the treasurer of Rochester Enable Limited, has produced a document that identifies some of the questions we're going to need to address if we're actually going to become a nonprofit corporation of our own. In this country, at least, every corporation must have, and typically does have, a president and a treasurer and a secretary. Those are, I think, the three mandatory roles. There can be any number of other officers. There are questions about how do those officers get selected. There are questions about what are the membership requirements for the organization. Basically, you need to produce a corporate bylaws document that lays out all of the formal structures. That gets submitted for incorporation. Once it's incorporated, you can then submit to the Internal Revenue Service of the United States government for nonprofit status. And in anywhere from 1 week to 6 months, and apparently it can be accelerated, you can be granted the nonprofit status. This is just a preview of the process that we are proceeding on. I think at the next meeting, the steering committee, the next town hall meeting, the steering committee will have a chance to look at those questions in the ERA org notes document in detail, recommend some answers, take a preliminary vote on issues that we think are ripe enough to fan out to the entire community. And if they're ratified, we will proceed on that unless we find some reasons to slow down. But we're proceeding on that course. That's governance. One of the reasons for this accelerated process is because with our nursing period with Bio for Climate coming to an end, we need to become self-supporting. We're being weaned from the financial support that we got from Bio for Climate for the first year of our existence. Ananda and Hart and I are taking the lead in trying to clarify what the ERA value proposition is and are preparing, and I would welcome any preliminary thoughts about this, to come back to our members as a first line of defense and support and say, we all are in a position to assess and support the value of the organization that we are creating together. In the near term, we have financial needs. Avery, by the way, is volunteering 10 hours a week. Cole has been paid for 40 hours a week, and there still hasn't been enough coal to go around. And we have ever more that we can productively do. And so we're likely to come back to the ERA membership and say, we have a fiscal sponsor. We have this button by which you can donate to support the ERA. We may have these guiding principles for thinking about what kind of support we would welcome. And we'd like your ideas about how to support and expand the kinds of activities that we've talked about today. I think that's sort of the update on the evolution of our impact network soon to be organization and our emerging budgetary process. I will say that in the long run, we expect to augment whatever support we get from internally from our membership with grant writing. Charles and I are already beginning to look into that, but we're looking for volunteers and recommendations as well. I'm just going to pause, see if there's any discussion about our organizational trajectory, comments, or offers of financial support, recommendations of who to reach out to for financial support, or ideas about who to approach for grant or other kinds of support. Comments, feedback? Philip, as ever?
Some of us have been working with Rob Delat to help his initiatives in the Amazon. That potentially could be something that the ERA more formally supports, and perhaps could be a pass-through entity, you know, taking off a small percentage that would generate some income for ERA.
Indeed, indeed, one of the things we can do. And one of my goals, my personal goals for this is I think there should be an ERA fund in which we can allocate funding for projects that we think are ripe and worthy of support, and we can raise money for those projects. And then the fiscal sponsor does indeed get 10%, which would support our ongoing operations and so on. With regard to Rob's project, I think there's a chance that I successfully wired Sue Butler some money this morning. Sue presented on this last week. If you're interested in supporting our own Amazon operation, reach out to Sue or Rob. As Philip points out, as we get our act together, we're going to make those project-specific support and funding opportunities more visible and more actionable. Any other questions or comments? Any concerns about this direction? We're sort of moving as fast as we know how. And I feel good about it. I feel especially good about the fact that the steering committee and Hart and Eric are just sort of jumping on board these various initiatives, because that's what it's going to take, is our little village, not any single one of us doing these kinds of things. Okay. I'm now looking at the agenda to see if we've actually covered anything, everything. We've certainly covered anything. Okay, we've covered everything on the agenda. There's no crime in ending early, but I suspect that people may want to use the 12 minutes we have to throw in other matters worthy of our time. Philip.
So we have a challenge that most of us here are older and white. We have attempted to be inclusive. We do have on the roster an incredible array of both individuals and organizations. I would just like to revisit the question of how do we mutually support each other as Alliance members, and what ideas people might have for perhaps structuring that, making it a proactive process. I think at one point, Cole was doing interviews. Maybe Cole, if you've got anything compiled from that, you can point us to it. But, and I know some of that's been incorporated into the big map, but those kinds of tools need care and feeding and marketing and promotion. And so that's one of the perhaps challenges we have to create that infrastructure, that cadre of people that are going to support that, perhaps in a volunteer way as we get started, so that we can market that as a benefit to being an Alliance member. You know, we will help get word out about, you know, things like what Michael just presented as incredibly inspiring, you know, what Peter's doing and so on. So those are, you know, maybe we create a document that's the proactive things that we are doing as an alliance to support each other as alliance members. And that can also be a piece of any fundraising package, is to highlight, you know, what we're doing. But I would just like to suggest that to date, it's been somewhat episodic. I think the lead example was the support we gave to the Nakavali refugee settlement. You know, how do we make that ongoing? We had, you know, Maximilian and a cadre of maybe, you know, 8 or 10 people that worked on putting together the X Prize thing, but we haven't seen them since. What do they need? What, you know, they contributed considerable amount of time and energy to putting that together. What do we need to do to kind of reciprocate and support what Max is doing in Egypt? All that kind of stuff.
I think that's great. So I heard two things. One had to do with diversity, and the other had to do with inventorying and then figuring out how to support the various collaborations that we have facilitated and wish to continue to encourage.
Yeah, and I'm suggesting those are linked. We have an incredibly diverse membership, but that's not showing up here. And I think part of the reason is that they are likely preoccupied with their own organizational immediate needs. And I'm just suggesting we should be more conscious about reaching out to those people to say, okay, how can we help you? You know, what's going to make it worth your while to show up occasionally to this meeting, so that we know you're part of the team. But I think we need to offer them something.
Right. Cole confirms that that is exactly the case, and so can I. And I will say that Jessica Porphyry is preparing a diversity and inclusion workshop for us to talk about those issues. She's got sort of personal, familial, and organizational experience with this. And by the way, the last I heard, she was thinking about ways in which her organization transitions US and ERA might together sort of feature this mix of diversity and activism. So that's one channel that's being actively explored. And I have offered to support that activity because she and Joaquin and Nathan are our most active American young non-white members. And indeed, they point out that because they are at that stage of their career and they're in particular circumstances, their time is limited because they're also trying to keep ends meet. So some financial support for them has been made available. If we had a budget, we could make more such support available. I'll also say that we had a really interesting interview last week. They are enumerated in the agenda notes, with a group from Uganda who I promised to connect them to Marius, but have not yet, to my knowledge. Cole may have taken care of it. But it included actually a German person who Eric should know about, and a Ugandan young man named Tommy, who I thought was incredibly articulate and thoughtful. And so we are reaching out to him to see if he would like to, that's great, Cole, reach out to Tommy and see if some of his time could be available to act as a liaison and an ambassador and a enricher of our conversation and outreach. So I take your point, Philip. It needs constant activity because we're still as a glance at the screen will indicate, still mostly a bunch of white guys, with all due respect, Maya. And yet we're trying to support a diverse human and living population. Points appreciated. Any other interjections for the last few minutes of this meeting? Okay. Cole.
Just a quick comment on proceeding with bringing in new members and things like that. I mean, it's always good to have more people in on the conversation, but I think it's important that when we introduce new members, especially ones that we've met with and who have articulated their needs and what we can do to support them, I think that that should be addressed when we introduce them, and it should open a conversation for how can we immediately try to assist them and resolve some of the issues that they're facing. And that way too, it adds, weight and agency to being in this alliance.
Well said, Cole. Why don't you ask Eric and Peter that question? Let's see how it goes.
I pass it to Eric and Peter.
I was so busy writing something very important in this context, so that please, if you would reword the question.
Go for it, Cole.
I guess the question, and somebody else add in here if I get it wrong, is how can the ERA best support your work, and what are some of the problems that you're facing that you would like assistance in resolving?
Yeah, that's very good questions to ask new members. I'm not going to answer them now unless you really want to hear this now. But how about, for example, that new people take the 2 minutes to create a profile? So a very simple profile that you could have in the web, which would be what can I bring in, and what do we need and how can you help us? And I think this is actually something very neat, that if you just send it via the newsletter, to the group, this is very interesting stuff for each of us to read, to meet like high quality new people. That's very nice, and it keeps, it facilitates that we begin to interact diversified without waiting for this centralized moderated meeting, because everybody's time is limited. And at the same time, it reduces a little bit the time during our video meetings. And it makes sense to have those profiles on the website, and if it's a text, it can even become a catalog, speakers catalog, so because this is high quality expertise, there's not many such groups, and otherwise people would look at like big institutions like Oxford University Natural blah blah group, but it's like super stiff, so to have them this easygoing, heart-based global expert community that is accessible for diverse things, also down to kindergarten, that's a very nice end.
It's a good answer, Eric. And Cole, no good deed going unpunished. Let's figure out how to make that inventory of needs and offers part of our onboarding process. Peter, any immediate thoughts about how we can support you in your work?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I, at my ripe old age, and I sort of kind of withdrawn very much from being active, and indeed partly from writing as well, because it seemed I was not getting the message across. And so when I met up with Rob, he basically fired me up again. I feel that through what he wants to do with me and ERA, I mean, I've been revitalized, and I feel that I can make a contribution. So it's for me. It's absolutely. I think the offer of an incredible opportunity to try and do my best with my abilities to both for, my own sake, my own well-being, mentally and so on, and also hopefully that it will prove to be useful in the long term for restoration.
It's great to hear, and rewarding and valuable feedback. We're at your service, and Cole, thank you for your latest contribution. Everyone, thank you for being here. See you in 2 weeks at 3 p.m. Eastern time, I hope. And I'm really very excited about the community we're building here. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.